You're listening to Rookie Pirate Radio, the official anime and manga podcast for InBetweenDrafts.com. I'm John Negroni.
And I'm Travis Hymas.
And today we're doing a manga recap of One Piece chapter 1109, titled Interception. And Travis, that title is fitting because you're going to have to intercept some real curveballs from me today. I hope you're ready.
I mean, if they're anything like the curveballs that Oda threw us this week, I've got my catcher's mitt ready to go. It's been worn out.
They're far less thought out, unfortunately, but hopefully as shocking. But as usual, we're going to be discussing spoilers for the One Piece manga up until this point. So if you have not yet read chapter 1109, be sure to do so now for free on the Viz website or the Shonen Jump app, linked in the show notes as always. And remember, all new One Piece chapters are available to read for free up to 3 weeks after their official release, or whenever you want if you're subscribed to Shonen Jump, which we are and do recommend. Now, normally this is the part of the show where I say something kind of silly and try to get everybody's attention so that we get people to join the Discord, but here's the thing. We have a new cover story, and I don't want to take time away from that, so we're going to do the quickest version of this ever. Travis, we have an email. We have a Discord. Can you please explain it to me like I'm 5?
So first off, an email is like sending a letter to Santa Claus, but using the computer. I guess if you're 5, it'd be an iPad. Using your iPad.
There you go.
But instead of sending a letter to Santa Claus, we are the Santa Claus in this scenario, and you can send us. I'm literally wearing red right now. Perfect. Yeah, it's perfect. And you can send your Christmas list to us at rookiepirateradio@gmail.com.
Let's hear it one more time.
rookiepirateradio@gmail.com.
Don't forget to ask your parents first. But
ask
of course,
your parents' permission before going online.
Yeah. But of course, we do also have our Discord, Travis. Everybody loves the Discord, and that's where most of the communication, that's where most of the magic happens, isn't it?
It truly is. The Discord is not just for this podcast as well. It's for everything that In Between Drafts covers. So that's TV, movies, video games, music, and more. We have a dedicated Pizza Wars channel, which has been full of slander lately, which is wild to me. But also, we have created a temporary channel for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth spoilers, which is itself turned into a sort of Pizza Wars as we debate the merits of Chadley. I'm pro Chadley personally, so if anybody's playing, join the Discord and throw in your thoughts there. There will be something very special here, hopefully pretty soon in the games channel regarding that game as well.
That's right, and as the author of much slander in many of these channels, be sure to hang out with us, of course. And we love hearing from people, and we know there are some lurkers too. We like you as well. One thing, always want to make sure we keep the show open and accessible and approachable for everybody. And one quick way you can do that is you can leave us a review or rating on Apple Podcasts. If you like our show enough and you want to leave us a few stars, we surely appreciate it. You don't have to leave us a $5 billion bounty, 5 billion berries, 5 billion stars, whatever. But we'll take whatever we can get, and all feedback is always appreciated. And we're going to need it because this chapter is definitely going to be, this is one of our big W's. Travis, you and me, we kind of cleaned up this week. You know, we've gotten knocked down a bit. We've been a bit like Kizaru and Saturn lately, just kind of getting thrown around, tossed by Oda himself. But this week we get to be in gear 5th, and it feels good.
It really does. Much like Saturn's own bounce back this week, I really feel like we've gum UFO'd our way back around to some accurate predictions.
Agreed. And I just want to jump right into the main beats. No time to waste here because we have been waiting for this for a long time. And Travis, we finally have a new cover story. Like clockwork. I mean, we typically have this like seasonal cycle of kind of the filler content in the reader requests, and it's always something a little bit different. And this is, of course, cover story number 26, as expected and predicted by, I think, both of us. I know I predicted this for sure. I think you also were kind of like, yeah, this is probably what's going to happen.
I'm pretty sure you brought it up, and I agreed with you at being a really good idea.
Which is, we're going back to Wano, and look, it's not the hardest thing to predict in the world. Most of the cover stories tend to backtrack on the previous arc in an interesting way, but specifically, I think you and I were both keen on, let's go back to Wano and kind of tie up some loose ends there. Now, we don't have a total inkling yet of what's going to happen here, like what this cover story is really going to be about, because we just see Wano, or we just see Onigashima, I should say, sunken into the underwater old city of Wano. I guess we'll find out how and why that happened. Maybe it's just such a heavy piece of land that it sinkholed its way to underwater Wano, which would make sense to me. I don't see, like, for example, Momonosuke and Yamato and all them being behind all that. But look, we're going to be able to discuss all this later. There's lots to speculate, but for now, let's keep going with these main beats. And I can't wait because I have so much to say about the cover story especially, but also the chapter itself, where we pick up literally in the middle of the message that started last week, that being the pre-recorded message being beamed to the entire world by Vegapunk and his satellites too that we see. We we unfortunately see the heart monitor again, and where last week we saw it start to flatline, this week we see that it's flatlining completely at this point, which a lot of people speculated. I remember at least one person in the comments did that they noted the heart monitor, and pretty tragic. It looks like that is what's connected to Vegapunk himself, and in usual Oda fashion, it looks like also the truth of the world that he teased last week is getting a delay, which is explained here by Shaka, who steps in during the pre-recording to argue that the world needs some time to get prepared to receive the information. I disagree. I've been waiting 20 years, Travis. I'm ready. But maybe some other people aren't. But yeah, Vegapunk argues that some intelligence agency will pick it up and spread the message across the world. He's probably thinking of Big News Morgan there. But Shaka points out that the world government might manipulate the information, so they may only have one shot at this. And so since it takes time too for the visual transponder snails around the world to get set up and everything, Shaka proposes that they wait an hour, and Vegapunk shoots back with a compromise of 10 minutes so that no one has time to interfere with the message before it can go through. While all this conversation is going on, the chapter is cutting to various vignettes we see the marine battle happening outside of Egghead. We see Luffy still holding off Kizaru and Saturn. We see some of the Straw Hats, including Sanji, who is holding an apparently dead Vegapunk, trying to wake him up. And of course, we see the Gorosei at Mary Jo. We have to know how they're reacting to this, which is stunned. They ask Saturn what is going on, apparently telepathically. I don't know if that's ever been revealed before. I don't remember knowing whether or not they could do that, unless it was like kind of hinted at or seen briefly during the last stuff that we saw with the Reverie in this arc. But anyway, Saturn tells them that Kizaru did kill Vegapunk. He saw it. So this message was apparently set up in the event of his death. The Gorosei reason out that they must find the source of the transmission and that it must be coming from the Labo phase on Egghead, which is still protected by the barrier, of course. And we'll have to talk about that barrier and it's what's going on with that later. Next, we visit some locations around the world reacting to the sudden message, including Dressrosa, Windmill Village in the East Blue, Water Sevens. We see Iceberg and his new secretary Alice, who I think was introduced in a cover story, the World Economic Journal HQ, and of course the West, North, and South Blues as well. At Kamabaka Queendom, we see Ivankov and the other revolutionaries gearing up for what's about to be revealed, and Dragon thinking back to when Shaka told him earlier in the arc that he suspected his death was imminent. Finally, we cut back to Luffy's fight with Saturn and Kizaru. Luffy notes that his punches aren't affecting or damaging Saturn, who tries to attack Luffy along with Kizaru, shooting some I-beams too, but Luffy dodges both of their attacks and declares he's keeping them at bay until his friends escape. Which, by the way, Travis, that kind of helps your theory that everyone's going to escape except for Luffy in this arc, which I still think would be a really cool swerve for the end of Egghead. But anyway, Luffy uses a new move called Dawn Symbol, one of my favorite new moves from him yet, where he slams Kizaru and Saturn together with both of his hands, flattening them into pancakes, and then he starts twirling them like pizza dough. It's glorious. He sends them flying out to the marine ships at sea. Kizaru crashes into his ship, but Saturn kind of like whirls around and flies back as a spinning spider UFO saucer thing. And Luffy's obviously very frustrated by this, that his attacks aren't really working. And Kizaru, he looks pretty beat up and done. He's lying on his back aboard the ship, holding his forehead, and it's looking pretty grim for him, especially if the Gorosei are going to try to get him to go to the lava phase and get through the barrier, because he, of course, can do that. As the fight continues, the Gorosei tell Saturn that there's no time for all of this because Vegapunk's message must not be allowed to continue. So Saturn, quote, makes the summons for the other elders to arrive at Egghead, which certainly signals to me that they are more desperate than ever. End of chapter. Break next week. Travis, so much to talk about here. Our first question for you that I have. Did you really see this coming, that we'd be getting like a Frieza, it would be like Namex and be destroyed in 5 minutes moment?
I mean, we've been in the Namex been going to be destroyed moment for like weeks now.
Fair enough.
The fact that Frieza is calling up Cell and Boo and bringing them all in for this moment, that's the twist. I think we were all kind of operating on the idea that we would go through maybe a couple of these Gorosei one at a time, or at least Saturn separately. This idea that they could communicate to each other telepathically, that they could summon each other like this. This is all new. I think Luffy's reaction is exactly what my reaction was too, was just the what? And, bug eye reaction. It just keeps getting so back and forth with this little conflict.
I definitely want to note, because I think a lot of people are going to be speculating, hey, why in the world don't the Gorosei just do this all the time when they need to take care of something, right? So like if they have so much power, and if the tax don't really work on them, and they can just communicate telepathically, and they can apparently, fast travel, why don't they leave Mary Joa more often? Why don't they do all this stuff? And you and I have talked about this a little bit of like, well, because the world is beneath them. Everybody's like insects or whatever. And also they don't necessarily need to, because like a lot of threats, they can kind of just send their cronies or whatever. And I think that's still true. But I also kind of get the feeling like there has to be some kind of price to this, that them using their powers has to have a drawback of some kind. It has to have some sort of vulnerability, because Oda always does it like this, where he tries to position it of like, yes, these characters have power. Kaidou is very, very powerful, but he can't be super reckless. He can't just go and, leave his territory and do whatever, because he might lose something in the process. His territory might be encroached upon. There's a balance between the four emperors. If he goes all out against Big Mom, then Shanks can take advantage. And then, that's how it's always kind of worked, right? And I wonder if he's setting up something with the yokai thing as well, where the five elders are kind of opening them up to something that's going to get exploited by another party, because it would just make it feel a little bit more like they are so desperate. Like they are so like, this cannot happen. And so they're willing to actually risk something. I think that would be super compelling.
I mean, this is, objectively speaking, the least protected Emu has ever been, to our knowledge.
Exactly.
For one,
we don't know if they can also
telling.
summon. Yeah, we don't know if they can go back too, right? So Mary Jo might be unprotected for a while.
I mean, there has to be some sort of logic to this, right? Because Saturn didn't teleport. Saturn sailed there, right?
Exactly. So one of them has to be there.
Yeah, I think one of them has to physically be there first, and this is some sort of like, this, at least to me, does connect their powers, which we had speculated before, that these might not be devil fruits, or I guess individual devil fruits, but rather something a little bit more direct, a little bit more emu-centric, who, again, is left kind of open right now. It's not like the staff of Pangaea Castle know that he exists. That's by design, right? If we didn't know it, it's good that we know exactly where Dragon is, because this is kind of the opportunity, right? Like,
yeah, and the only person in his way is a Kainu, and that is a confrontation that could be like our next Royale, kind of thing.
The Holy Knights, I guess, are still a factor here.
Yes, but we know that they've been dispatced to other parts of the world.
Yeah, we know worst case Garling is there, and that that's just a tantalizing idea in and of itself. But yeah, there has to be some sort of trade-off. At the very least, they are in public, in their true selves, which I think this also confirms this isn't like some sort of projection or something else going on.
Yes,
which we've theorized before. This is them in the flesh. The main thing that I am mostly worried about, though, at this point is I'm not sure that it matters if there's a downside, because this is going to be tough. Our boy is on the back foot now.
Well, and before we go fully into that, I do also want to jump to what, or build upon what you're saying, which is that there has to be something about their powers that ties into, like, we already know that they do not want people to see them in this form. It's like they don't want people to know this power exists. And the anime has been kind of like tracking along nicely lately with the manga, because we've been getting like extra sort of like reminders of how the Gorosei, like, they don't want people to know the name of the ancient kingdom. That was the big impetus for Ohara, which you, of course, have speculated on, which I think is like really, really solid, which is that Vegapunk revealing the name of the ancient kingdom is enough to sort of like spark bedlam for some reason. And I feel like these things have to be tied together. You know, the yokai stuff, their powers, how they were able to defeat the ancient kingdom, and how like all this stuff came about. We still don't really have a lot of hints for like, why do they not want people to know they have this power? Like, what is it about it that is so dangerous and so existentially threatening to them? But the motivation there is still such a mystery. And it's like, we can speculate all day, but to what you're saying, the real urgent thing in this moment is that Luffy doesn't stand a chance probably against the Gorosei.
I'm hesitant to say he doesn't stand a chance, but I do want to highlight specifically the way Saturn is reacting to Gear 5th versus any other character. It's the vibe that I get, and this I think is kind of one that sounds obvious, but like seeing it in action really solidifies it. He's flexing with these powers. Saturn isn't just resisting or getting mad or trying his own attacks. Luffy pancakes this man, throws him like a frisbee, and he just goes with it. He just redirects his trajectory, right? He's playing along. He knows how to fight this power. That's the vibe that I get. They've done this rodeo before. So, which is not something that anybody else has done. So that, I think, even if there's, you know, some inherent power resistance or something, which seems to be the case, the fact that Luffy highlights multiple times that he's not leaving any marks, he's not leaving any damage, is Oda telling us, hey, this doesn't look as painful as it is. This isn't really working. And I think that they either have a natural resistance to or just a familiarity with how these powers work. And that the best way to deal with them is to lean into it and take advantage of it and counterattack that way. I do
think that's something that we could draw from this too, is that maybe one of the reasons, like the strategy here that Saturn has is maybe he does have enough hockey to basically like repel the awakening, but because he knows that it's not really going to damage him, he's not willing to use the power necessary to like resist all of it. Because maybe in his mind, losing that amount of hockey is a bigger power suck than actually just taking the damage, because the damage itself isn't working, if that makes, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
like,
I'm glad. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm glad you brought up hockey, because I think that's a critical factor in this that hasn't come up yet. If there are hockey masters in this world, all 5 of them just showed up on this island. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And we know that like, apparently Gear 5th is so powerful. Like Kaidou didn't have enough hockey to totally resist it. Like it managed to like control him a bunch too. So there's something to be said about that, you know, that like, it's not like it's easy to repel. And if they can, I don't think that they're willing to, because it would leave them probably vulnerable. Like it would probably make it so that Luffy could then leave some damage that way. So that's how I like to read it. But of course I could be just totally overanalyzing it. But yeah, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen next. I think it's keen to show that Kizaru really is like beaten up, because if he does try to make another move, I think Sanji is able to stand against him at this point. Sanji's still pretty like, you know, not full health, but pretty close, like from what we've seen. And we know that he can go toe to toe with Kizaru, at least when Kizaru is like not 100%.
You floated an interesting idea about Kizaru from here that I'd like to talk about a little bit more. But
glad you brought that up.
I do think he's KO'd. I think that's especially since the battle has changed now. We have new players and everything. I think Luffy v Kizaru is done, and we have our winner there, which is not nothing.
Yeah, Luffy beat Kizaru. I mean, that's what it looks like, and who knows if that'll be 100% confirmed. But the thing that I brought up is that this could be a moment, and maybe I'm reaching here, because I think there are 2 very likely scenarios that are occurring to me. One is that the Gorosei show up and they're there with Kizaru. Kizaru and them are in the same vicinity. They could immediately order him to go through the barrier or to do something, right? And I think that he would have to. He doesn't have a choice. I think that they know that he did his job. He did kill Vegapunk, based on like what Saturn witnessed. And so I think that he's kind of off the hook there. But then the other scenario is that like he can't move and he knows that he's failed because they want him to do this thing and he escapes. And my idea is that like, what if he manages to escape and turns himself into the Cross Guild, or gets captured by somebody along the way and gets turned into the Cross Guild for his bounty? Because I think at this point, the guy, he's not going to join the good guys. He's not going to, he's not going to pull a Kuzan, but in the direction of the Straw Hats. I think there's no way that this doesn't work. So if he goes anywhere, I don't think I think the deal is done for him to be a lackey for the Marines. I think that they're going to get rid of him because of what he's done here. Or at the very least, I think he's just so dispirited that I think this could be a moment where he quits altogether and then wants to join the Cross Guild because he knows that like who could protect him at this point, right? Who would be willing to protect him? He can't go to Blackbeard because Kuzan's already there and that doesn't work. But he could go to the Cross Guild because they have Mihawk. And Mihawk is like one of the most, is one of the actual like titans of this world. And he could reasonably kind of make that happen. I mean, there's not a ton of setup for it, but I like the idea of every faction gets like a former admiral, so like Blackbeard, major contender for the One Piece, gets Kuzan, and then Cross Guild, major contender for the One Piece, gets Kizaru. And then you have Green Bull and Sakazuki. I don't think they're going anywhere necessarily, but Luffy, of course, could ultimately have Fujitora as an ally. That's already kind of been set up. So what do you think of this, though? I know I proposed in the Discord. It got some glances.
Like I said, I wanted you to bring this up because I think it's an interesting idea that Kizaru could go rogue. I also like the idea that you posited at the start that somebody takes advantage of this moment specifically and slaps some sea stone cuffs on him and just gets the heck out of here.
That's what
kind
I want.
That's kind of a funny bit that would play very in line with Cross Guild. And then like Mihawk Mihawk sees that Kizaru's here, and instead of like executing him and paying out, they just recruit him instead.
Exactly.
That seems fun, which kind of feels like the angle that Oda is taking with Cross Guild, because like they're
it's an island of misfit toys.
It is. It's an island of misfit Oda's favorite pieces, right? Like the stuff that doesn't necessarily fit elsewhere. Putting these folks together in a room has led to some of the more funny and more levity moments of the recent arc. And so adding to that is not a bad idea, I think.
I mean,
it's
Buggy
a fun
having
prospect.
Borsalino as a bodyguard would be so funny. So freaking funny.
And Borsalino so burnt out and over it that he's just cool about it. Like that would be funny. A
John Mulaney, like this might as well happen kind of moment.
Yeah, it's like, this is where I am now. Like it's such a funny moment that it, like, even though like the pieces aren't all there yet, at the end of the day, the real reason anything happens in One Piece is because it's funny. So it makes perfect sense to me that Kizaru would find his way to Cross Guild because that's funny.
One other thing that, should the other wild card to this whole battle map is the Giants. We know the Giants can back up Luffy at this point. I don't know how much they can help against Gorosei. It could be a we'll hold him off, Straw Hat, go escape with your friends or something like that. As the message is going out, that's certainly a reasonable proposition. Of course, it could lead to the eradication of the giant pirates, which would be pretty devastating, for the stuff that would happen with Elbaf. It seems like the Straw Hats might be splitting up to get to Elbaf at this point, but who knows? It's still a lot to be seen there. I've been thinking a lot about Elbaf the last couple of weeks and the connections between the Giants, like we talked about last week, the Giants in the Ancient Kingdom, the Giants and Skypiea. We've long been waiting Elbaf could be like a Jack and the Beanstalk kind of thing. Because we know the Giants know about Sky Islands. We know that they have some kind of connection to the Sky Islands. That's really interesting. It's different. And there's a lot of setup for the last supernova for us to really get due from, which is Mad Monk. Is it La Rouge or Rouge? I forget how you say his name.
Rouge, something like that, yeah.
Which tells you how much we've gotten from him in the story.
Which is nothing.
Yeah, just a sort of he went to Whole Cake Island, he beat one of the Sweet Generals, and then he lost to Cracker. That's kind of more or less. There's the speculation that he might be from Burka, but he kind of like, I think the SBS, he looks more Skypean, but the modern version of him, he seems to have more Burka traits. But I'm not the biggest expert on the differences since it's not my favorite arc, Skypea. But that said, I think that if we are going from Egghead to Elbaf, do you see what I'm saying of like the connection between what Vegapunk is about to reveal that could be connected to the Giants and the Sky Islands? And this stuff feels like interconnected, right?
Yeah, that's a good segue to actually this whole announcement and giving us a 10-minute clock, all the fun stuff. It's nice that it's like not a countdown to destruction anymore, but it's like a countdown to victory for our boys. That's kind of fun.
It's a subversion. And that's how you know the arc is ending. That's like such a Oda thing.
Right. But
we're in the climax.
We're in the final moments. And it's fun to know that we kind of like called like the use of the visual transponder signals, and we talked at length before about how Vegapunk's credibility is the biggest liability for the world government, and that's playing out in real time. It's
confirmed the world over. So, people are like, Vegapunk's giving a message because he's helped so many people that they stand up and listen when he, is going to be communicating to them directly.
It's going to be very difficult to try to be like, oh, he's lying, he made it, all this other stuff. Like, you're not going to be able to do that. So we're seeing that play out. And
big W for you on the visual transponder snail. You totally called it.
It makes sense, but I was talking with somebody else about this and kind of what we thought was going to happen, because I think the general consensus is we're not getting all the answers. That's not fun. Nobody really wants that, I think. But whatever's going to happen, there's a visual component now, right? Because we've had it specifically brought up that they're using the visuals transponder snails. There is something that he has, not just something that he knows, and he's going to show it on screen. And that is interesting.
Yeah.
I am very curious because, and I've been thinking about this since my friend brought this up. We don't know what Uranus looks like still, do we?
No, we don't. We do not.
And if Uranus is in fact the weapon that was used at Lucia, that might not be a thing that the government wants people to know about.
Yeah, the Mother Flame. But although that was supposed to be under his nose, like York was doing that without his knowledge, is what we understand of the situation. But York could be taking information that Vegapunk was studying that he could reveal here, right? Of like, he knows what the ancient weapon is, and that can connect to how York was able to like subvert it into something for the world government, which would make perfect sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that would be a fitting conclusion for him, right? Is I did a thing and it led to this. It being an absolution at the same time, that's completely reasonable. But there's got to be a visual component to it now that we didn't really take into account last week.
Can't forget that the other wild card is the Iron Giant, which has gotten its anime debut recently. And, it's still in the middle of turning on. It's like a freaking Windows PC from 1995. It needs a moment. But yeah, that thing is still out there too. And we don't know how that's going to play into anything, which we didn't, who knows? Maybe that's the thing that's going to save what's going on, just in terms of like the Iron Giant intercepting things and holding off the Gorosei or something. I don't know, because like this stuff is still so wild to me.
That robot is such a tease, man. I don't know what to make of it anymore. Like comparing it to a Windows XP machine is pretty apt. It is ancient technology, but like, it hasn't moved. It kind of is like teasing, oh, we're going to move, and then it just doesn't. Yeah, and like, I have no idea what to make of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Iron Giant watch continues. It's still on our radar for sure. Other thing, I want to rescind something. I brought this up in the Discord that I said last week. And last week I said that, because Saul was referenced by a doll. And we know that Saul is still alive. We know that Saul is probably at Elbaf, is the idea that he survived Kuzan's ice attack and everything, and he's been in hiding. And there was also earlier in last week's chapter that the Giants referenced like a scholar who told them about Vegapunk. And I think I immediately was just like, oh yeah, they're talking about Saul. But then watching the anime this week, I was like, well, wait a minute, he wasn't a scholar. Like, I think I was being a little bit too reckless there, because they showed the flashback to Ohara. So we got a bit of a refresher there. And if they're talking about a scholar who told them about Vegapunk, they're probably talking about Clover. And it doesn't mean that Clover's still alive. Like, that would probably not make sense. They could also be talking about Olvia. But essentially, like, there is a chance, right, that I think it's Dorian Broggie, right, who were talking about this, and like they weren't at Elbaf for like 100 years ago. So it just leaves a lot to be question of like, how could they know? Because I guess it would have to be recent. So like, Travis, what do you think? Is there a chance that like Olvia, Robin's mom, or Clover is somehow survived O'Hara and Nico Robin isn't the last survivor, and they told the Giants about what's going on?
I have feelings about this. You are correct. I don't want to push back on your read of that. I think that's a good point. I should have caught that and didn't. But at the same time, is it Nico Robin's mother?
Or is it somebody who just is it could be somebody who's a fan of O'Hara. It doesn't have to be a scholar from that time. It could be somebody who's inherited the will.
Yeah, I think there's the desire to see that, because it's kind of nice to know that like Robin's life wasn't that miserable or didn't have to be that miserable. But I do think that like if like Clover was alive or her mom was alive, then Shaka probably would have said so, would have been probably my main indicator. The other thing is that at that point, you've basically just like completely upended Robin's story, because Robin's story, the main issue is not like the tragedy of O'Hara itself happens. Like that's a part of it, but that's not her trauma. Her trauma is what she loses. And so to just give all of that back, it doesn't feel so great from a storytelling perspective.
Yeah.
So I think it's somebody else. Now, there are other scholars out there. There's a lot of them that could be related to this, but a part of me kind of makes me think, what if it is a giant scholar specifically? Because that would be someone who would be able to justify keeping the books that were salvaged from that Buster call in the
like
first
Giant
place.
Jack, right? Like there are a few giants that have been referenced that we don't know that much about yet. That, again, like referencing the Jack and the Beanstalk stuff, like a castle in the sky, like there could be a really cool secondary location to Elbaf that the Straw Hats go to, that to find the person who has this knowledge. Like that could be really cool. It could be one of those things where they find Jaguar D. Saul and he knows where to find Giant Jack or whatever. Or it could be like another character and they could get more information involving the man with the burn scars. Who knows? But I think ultimately the reason I kind of had that jump to conclusions moment with the anime is because it kind of reiterates what we learned earlier in the arc about how those books were saved and the scholars saved, like during the Buster Call, threw them into the lake. And that's apparently why Robin's mother went back and why she didn't go with Robin with Saul, right? Because she says way back in Annie's lobby, right? Like in the flashback, that she still had to take care of something. And at the time, we didn't really know what. Unless I'm forgetting, but I think it was a revelation that the books were saved, because I don't remember that being revealed in Annie's lobby at all.
Oh no, that was a reveal, absolutely.
Right. So like, because then you have the moment where Vegapunk and Dragon are like, they're kind of chatting about what's going on. So the anime is going to cover that soon as well. Also, by the way, loved seeing young Clover. That was awesome in the anime. But anyway, yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at with it now. I think that there's like, Oda's probably not going to do something like that. I think, but one other thing that got pointed out to me by somebody who was listening to our conversation last week, they said that another reason that it's clear that Vegapunk's really dead here is that he's about to give a big speech. And whenever like a character like in the present dies, they give a big speech, right? The whole series starts with Goldie Roger giving a speech. When Whitebeard dies, he gives a big speech. As recently as Wano, when Yasue dies, it's the big speech. It's like one of the best moments in the arc. So that's also another like, this is Vegapunk's last hurrah, at least as the Stella.
Yeah, I think, notably the shot of his face that we get here doesn't really show him smiling or anything, but it's also not like the most detailed in the world. I would go so far as to say that we're probably not going to get a good look at the body until the end of this, and we actually get to see the final like death panel. But he's done. I think we all knew he was going to be done, but we are here now.
A segue to the cover story, because we've been talking about the Giants. I remember you and I weren't doing this like manga recap stuff yet at the time, but I remember way back when we first saw Onigashima and we see like the big sword. I always was like, oh, giants, like that must have belonged to a giant at some point, and there must be some kind of connection. And I think that that's like supported by a lot of things in the story in terms of like the connection between the giants and Wano. And I think like the whole thing with Wano coming back to the story and the ancient kingdom and certain things revealing back to like Wano is like kind of this preserved country and everything. We don't know whose story that is and all that, but I could definitely see that playing into things. And I love that the cover story kind of lends some credence to that because we still have Onigashima on the brain. I mean, whose skull is that, right? And I brought this up in the Discord. And by whose skull is that, I'm talking specifically about the Onigashima skull. My idea here is that I wonder if there was a race that wasn't like the giants we know today, but it was kind of like the giants and the Oni put together. And maybe they kind of split off into like cousin races or something, kind of like the Skypeans. But Kaidou, for example, is a big guy, but he's not as big as a giant. He has the horns. But Onigashima has the skull, apparently, of like an Oni, but a huge Oni. So that just had me wondering, like, if people were like back in the ancient kingdom days, bigger or whatever, I just kind of wonder if like maybe that's the missing race and Kaidou was just kind of like a setup to that. You know what I mean? And that could speak to why is he's like so powerful, because he's part of this like this race. Like he has blood in him as an Oni that is just like super, super rare and special and all that.
That's a curious idea. For what? Really quick though, I just want to let this sink in. We have cover stories back. Oh baby, we have cover stories back. I'm so happy. For me, though, looking at this, what was most notable to me was that we are looking at the location of Pluton here. So, however Onigashima ended up here, our attention is meant to be drawn to the location within Wano that it is. I don't know that the cover story is going to follow the island itself as much as what is underwater here, since that was one of the last things that we really got to see of Wano in the first place. We floated, of course, the idea that Blackbeard finds out about all this info, and so they go to Wano. That's starting to seem relatively credible.
Yeah, I might have been right.
Yeah.
And also, Stephen Paul and Vanessa Satone also doing the chapter this week in terms of translation and lettering. Great work as always.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Back to the cover story really quick. Who do you think it's going to follow? Because it usually follows a character, right?
Yeah. I don't think this is a Pluton moment. I remember when we first were talking about this, I don't even remember if it was on the air, if I was just talking about it with you. I always liked the idea of, showing Yamato going around Wano and like doing her research and stuff, and then something kind of interrupts that, like doing the thing where she travels and all. But sorry, I have to bring this up because I've also been thinking about Naruto and how Oda likes to do Naruto stuff. Kaidou and Luffy were having an entire battle on top of this skull, right? And so much of that whole conversation that they were having was about Joy Boy. Could that be either Joy Boy's skull or the skull of like somebody really close to Joy Boy? Because that would be just like in Naruto when Naruto and Sasuke have the big fight where it's like in the valley where Madara and Tobirama? I forget his name. The first Hokage, when they had their big battle. And like that doesn't become relevant until much later. And you're like, oh wow, that was even more symbolic than we originally thought. So I can't stop thinking about like, does that skull belong to somebody super important? I know they would be too big of a head for the straw hat that we saw. So maybe, I don't know. Am I losing it?
You're thinking of Hashirama first.
Hashirama. Tobirama, I think. Yeah. Tobirama, I think is the second Hokage.
Yeah. Not to show my cred or anything, but I don't know that this is Joy Boy's skull thing has been kicked around for a while. Actually,
I never even saw that, but it makes sense.
It does until we have the information that we do now, right? Like, it seems significantly more likely at this point that if Joy Boy was not human, he was probably a buccaneer. The race stuff in One Piece is always weird, though, because there are people who are just born weird, for lack of a nuanced way of putting it. Like Big Mom, not a giant, specifically. Whitebeard, never been named as a giant, not named as a buccaneer. Maybe he is. Maybe we'll get that in an SBS someday. But like right now, that's not the case. We only just got the hints that there may be something. I guess the confirmation that there's something up with Blackbeard's bloodline, which could still be a genetics thing as well.
Right.
So it's like There is just so many like weird little half sciencey things going on. It's so hard to pinpoint. For me, when it came down to just like figuring out this whole thing, I basically just kind of put it all aside and was like, I think he just thinks the skull is cool. And so it kind of builds this lore because Wano was supposed to be like this land of like myths and legends, right?
Yeah.
It was a land of dragons. So, the idea that it would have like these monsters, or maybe this is even the hint of the yokai stuff that would come with the Gorosei. Maybe that's
right. I did mention that in the Discord too. Like if there's a connection between the Oni and the yokai, because there is,
Yeah, like that's completely feasible. This could very well just be a world building thing, but it is also where the cover story starts. So it's not like right now, knowing just with everything that we have in front of us, that's it. We have the location of Pluton, and now this skull is here. Maybe.
And the thing to remember too is that Momonosuke chose not to open up the borders for a reason. If he had done it earlier and Zunisha had knocked down the walls, then we wouldn't be getting this moment where Onigashima sinks, right? And it would be in this like underwater place. It makes me wonder if Oda wanted to do something else here, which is another kind of lending of the credence to like continuing to like see something happening in this location, to what you're saying, whether that has something to do with Pluton, or of course, many people have speculated, I think rightfully so, that Big Mom and Kaidou could come back in the story somehow because they're in like the magma stuff. But if there could be a reason for somebody to be trying to find Big Mom and Kaidou, right? So that could be our main character. It could be like what the Big Mom pirates. It could be some of the Sweet Generals trying to find Big Mom. It could be somebody from Kaido's crew that is unaccounted for.
The Toby Roppo, we're missing most of them. We only know about King and Queen, technically.
Right. Who's who, for example, could be in this somehow. I don't know for sure, because like nothing speaks to me as like, this is a character we need to see again. Necessarily.
It is. Yeah. I think it is nice that we're doing this in any case, because I think the idea that a lot of people had coming out of Wano was that there were some things that happened towards the end there. And and I think there was just kind of this general malaise about the end of it where everybody was kind of ready for it to be over. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so even Oda was kind of knew that and kind of needed it to be over with. And then he decides, Momonosuke's not going to open the gates of Wano. Okay, why? Tell you later. Yamato, I'm going to join the Straw Hats. No, I'm not. I'm going to tell you in a flashback after we get the end card. We're not going. Shanks is going to show up, and we're going to do nothing with that. Like stuff like that, where it's it's fine. It's completely serviceable. Not saying it's a bad decision or anything. But I think it left people feeling incomplete, and so they kind of have this kind of like emptiness about the ending of Wano. I feel like this is actually the reason why.
Yeah, because we don't necessarily like our assumptions. Probably has to be that a lot of, if not all of the Kaidou pirates who didn't escape were locked up in Udon at some point. I don't think Green Bull left. Like he went by himself, so he didn't leave, as far as we know, with Queen and King and them. That they're probably locked up in sea stone cuffs and all that stuff. So we could also see them again at any moment. Yamato is still here, as we know, and she's part Oni. Like there's all kinds of things that could happen here that would be pretty interesting. The thing is, if you're going to have somebody going underwater, it has to be a fishman, right? So like, it could even be the Sun Pirates. Like what happened with them? We don't know. It could be Jack. Jack is probably the only major Kaidou crew member who could survive down here. And if he was searching for Kaidou, that would make sense. Like the thing is, like, could he have escaped Udon? I don't know. I wouldn't assume so. And also, no one likes Jack, including Jack. So, like, it's a big question mark for sure. I'm excited for us to be totally surprised, and it's like somebody we never even thought of. You know what I mean? The other person, of course, could be Kawamatsu, because he's a fishman as well, and so like he could come down here to be like, what happened? Onigashima sank into the old city. Why did that happen? What caused this? So we can think of all kinds of scenarios.
Yeah, I wonder if the secret of this like underwater Wano was actually shared with Momonosuke and the Scabbards. We know it was shared with Robin and Law. I would kind of hope that it was, but also like his grandfather has been hiding his identity and didn't really seem interested in coming back. So I wonder if that's still just being withheld.
Yeah.
It
could be like safety. The Beiji. Yeah, it could be like the Beiji cover story where we get an inkling of their reunion here, and it's like, wait, you're my grandfather? And like, that's like the dialogue or something. And he's like, no time, I have to tell you something.
That's true. That's true. Not that much time has passed, realistically.
Yeah. I mean, we're only talking about a week or so since Wano, the Straw Hats left Wano.
The One Piece timeline is so weird.
It really is. It really is. Yeah, because when did they fit in all these movies? But anyway, yeah, great to have another cover story. I'm just so stoked to see like what this means and why it's relevant that like when Wano gets opened up again, Onigashima is in this location specifically. And if there was something more to that island than we knew, because I mean, to us, it was just like a random island that had this skull on it. And I think the implication was always that it was just like a random island off the coast of Wano that Kaidou put his castle in. And maybe Kaidou literally found this giant's head there, or he put it there. Who knows? But I just think there's something to the idea that it's like connected to like you said, the world building of Wano and a story about Wano we just don't know yet. That has to do with like, where did the skull come from and why is it relevant that it got brought back here? And a lot of that stuff could also be tied to what Momonosuke read in Oden's journal. How would Oden know of any of that stuff? Why did it inform Momo's decision not to open the borders? Find out sometime on One Piece Z, you know?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I guess it could even just follow Momonosuke specifically as a character and his thought process in revealing those. Since we now know that things that get revealed in the cover stories will have direct impacts on chapters, like whatever it's going to be, it's not going to be a fun little jaunt through life, right? It's probably going to be a big deal.
I didn't have too much else to add from the chapter itself. It was cool kind of checking in on, like in Dressrosa, we see Rebecca is having like a training session with Kiros. And we also see that the Tontada pirates of the Grand Fleet have come back to Dressrosa. So like we know that they're okay after what happened at Marijoa. And that also means that they're not like super far away from the main action. So if they're in Dressrosa, they're only like a couple of weeks away from Egghead. It's my understanding. So that's kind of interesting to point out. And also that Rebecca and some of those other characters could be coming back.
Yeah, I mean, I was more going to point out that this means that the Straw Hat Grand Fleet has not mobilized based on this evidence, right?
Which I think we kind of knew was probably the case.
But
well, I think we talked about them. Well, we talked about them mobilizing after this arc, right? Because we talked about how, like, when the news reaches the incident that happened at Egghead, and then now I think we can safely say the big incident that was teased right at the end of the world tour part of this arc, that something crazy is going to happen in this day. I think that's the Vegapunk message. I think we can all surmise, right? Vegapunk revealing the truth of this world and all that stuff. But also just like going back to Fuchsia Village is super interesting, or Windmill Village. Just like, there's got to be something intentional about that, of like going to Luffy's hometown, just to show that like even in the most remote places of the world, sure, they don't have the fancy visual snails, but they are getting this. Like they're getting like at least the audio version of it. They're getting the podcast version. You know, if you're not watching the podcast, this is what's happening right now. But then also Water 7, I think, is kind of significant. There's been a lot of Water 7 stuff, as you and I have talked about in this arc. Seeing Iceberg's genius secretary Alice show up back on the story, I think there's something to that too. There's a lot of connective tissue between these events and the stuff that was revealed, like we've already been talking about with like Robin, Mother, the Atom Tree, like all kinds of things. But then notably,
these are all world government aligned or members, right? Even Windmill Village is a part of Goa Kingdom.
Yeah.
So this is very specifically the places that they do not want this message reaching. So it's very, very well thought out. I also want to highlight my personal favorite of these little check-ins, which is the Economic Journal HQ, because Wapol looks incredible here. My man looks like he has been to hell and back.
He needs a nap.
He really needs a nap.
Yeah. 100%. And I think it's
for real. He just like me for real.
Yeah, happy to see him in it. And it's a lot of setup. Like there's not a ton of like new information here, but it is getting the message across that we've already said, that like people are paying attention because it's Vegapunk and something wild is about to be revealed. And I just wonder. But that's all I have before getting into the comments. Did you have any other things? Like specific things from the chapter?
I do want to highlight just the overall artwork this week is really, really good. I think Oda's back on the ball, finally fully recovered and everything. I know we've been getting kind of lesser and less pages, so people have been worried about that, but these are some of the most dynamic action scenes we've had in a hot minute, I think.
That final spread with the final panel with like all the Gorosei is like incredibly composed. Like it looks so brilliant.
And it gives us a good sense of scale, since this has now become a battle arena, right? This is effectively like one big fighting game stage, and like given Saturn's scale and everything, it's huge. And it's a really good use of that scale to give us an idea of just exactly how terrifying all this is.
Absolutely. And, you know, I left this off. I totally missed that. We do also see Atlas and Bonnie and Kuma and the younger giants, Komi and Oshi. They reach the ship in the northeast shore. So that is also set up here as well. I kind of left that out by accident. So yeah, that's where we are. And
yeah, I think so.
There's so much more to say and see. For comments, don't have a ton since we're recording this a little bit earlier. So like people are still kind of revealing or kind of going their way. Oh, and actually there was one more thing. We're only 2 chapters away from 1111, which it could be a big Zoro chapter. And so I'm kind of like, ooh, you know, like that's 2 chapters away, and we've checked in with Zoro and Lucci. Are we going to get a big Zoro moment or something? Want to do a quick Zoro watch there? It'll be several weeks, I think, before we get to that, but I think that could be kind of cool. Do you think 1111? I mean, because I'm, of course, referencing that like Oda always kind of does 11 with Zoro.
I mean, this is not financial advice, but it's always good to hodl on to a couple of Zoro stocks at a time, right?
Sure. And also like 11, that's how many straw hats we could end up with. So yeah, there's a few things you could read into that. But anyway.
He slid it in, folks. Bonnie's barely in the chapter, and he got it in.
Just a little bit. Okay, yeah. So I don't have a ton of comments, like I said, but here's one from BRND-NDSS. Saturn put a lot of emphasis on saw in I saw it. Maybe he saw something we couldn't, like the devil from his fruit leaving Vegapunk's body, or maybe I'm just reading into it too much. I love stuff like this because I'm like, who knows, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I think that there's something weird about these powers that they have.
That's a sick idea, actually. Like that they can see the powers themselves. That would be. What if that's tied to what Blackbeard can do?
Yes. Well, speaking of which, I really love this comment from someone we've seen a lot of, Blue Dan Bob, who said, I wonder if the 5 Elders' immortality stems from their merely being extensions of Emu's power split as Vegapunk is. They can't die until he does. So that would explain like why they're not really taking damage. But that would, of course, be different from Vegapunk. But yeah, the idea that like the satellites and the Stella is kind of a parallel to like Emu and the Gorosei, that's kind of interesting. That kind of fits.
That is a good idea. It would be a good way to explain things, like use the Vegapunks in the story to then explain it later when it comes time to cover that. Because I don't know if learning that somebody sits on the empty throne is something that's going to come up here. That feels maybe like a hair too far, but I mean, I could be wrong.
Wolf D. Harry said, page 13, it's definitely Kizaru crying for killing Vegapunk. He feels guilty. Yeah, we've seen him crying over the situation. I think he's also in a lot of pain, but he's in physical pain. I think he's in emotional pain. But Travis, I think you said it best last week when you're like, he's not really going all out. He's not in a fully realized state because he doesn't want to be doing any of this. You know what I mean? And I think you were totally spot on about that. And him, it's just like, he doesn't have the will to get up at this point. Like he probably could if he really cared enough.
Sure, like his heart's not in it, his will's not in it. Like that's how you always lose a fight against Luffy, is your will just isn't high enough. But either way, he took the L. That's a win for Luffy. He's beaten his first admiral proper, as far as I'm concerned.
It's like when Luffy against Lucci, right? Like what made that fight was Luffy getting back up, and he had a reason to get back up. Otherwise, Lucci wins that fight, right? And so, yeah, Lucci, Luffy, Lucy gets reference in this. Can't forget that. But yeah. Black Knight Halbert, another frequent commenter. Love the mare being too cheap for a video snail. LMAO. Gear 5 continuing to be the best power-up in shonen manga, period. Luffy is going to give all 5 Gorosei a beatdown in 10 minutes or it's free. So I do disagree that he's going to give them a beatdown. I think it's going to be a big like fight and that Luffy is going to barely survive. And I think though, I couldn't agree more with like Gear 5 has to be one of my favorite power-ups ever in shonen manga. Like it really is. Like to me, it's up there with Super Saiyan.
It's one of those things where even now it still feel like if you went to somebody who was still catching up on One Piece and told them that this is what happens, they almost aren't going to believe you, save for the fact that it's been plastered everywhere in marketing ever since it went live. But like, I mean, I remember when we were all talking about it and everybody was excited and we were throwing things like Resin Man out into the world, right? Like,
what a time!
Like we were literally doing the history of rubber innovation as an industry. 101. Yeah, we were all over the place, and nobody went, well, okay, what if he just gets more Bugs Bunny like?
Yeah,
like
Looney Tunes it. Never underestimate it as imagination.
Yeah, and then it happens, and it makes perfect sense. Yeah. It is a great culmination of everything that has gotten up to this point. Because people, we talked about Gear 5th, because some people think Gear 5th is too silly. Like, have you seen Gear 4th? Have you looked at, like, the first time Gear 4th is revealed? I love the Gear 4th reveal in the anime because they came up with that very specific, like, hard rubber dodgeball sound to go along with it. It's stupid. It is, like if you did that in Bleach, it would be a gag and nobody would like it. Yeah. But here, it's this culmination moment, and the fact that it is also incredibly funny looking is the point. It's not something that you could do anywhere else, and that's what makes it so special.
Remy 1008 said, Luffy's going to be the one to destroy the video message because he doesn't want to find out the truth about the world this way. And frankly, neither do I. I mean, I don't think he knows the message is happening. I guess like we don't know if like the message will be themed in somewhere.
He can hear it. He says, huh, during the chapter. Like he acknowledges it.
Fair enough.
But let's be honest, he doesn't care. He doesn't care. Like as long as Vegapunk isn't telling him what the One Piece is, we're good.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I don't think we have to worry. It's hard to say. Illumi No I Gaming said 10 minutes for them, 10 days for us. We'll need a little more than coffee, guys. I think not 10 minutes, not 10 days for us. I think it's going to be like 10 chapters for us, quite honestly. At least.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just because this is like the climax of the arc does not mean that like we're wrapping this up in like 5 chapters, right? No, this is... I mean, he could still sneak a whole flashback still in here.
Adams K0. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, I guess in a sort of a way with like the little back and forth between Shaka and him and everything, he has in fact snuck a flashback into all of this. Because now we can just keep cutting back to that monitor with them trying to fill 10 minutes of time. And since One Piece time is like distorted, that could be anything.
Shaka, how have you been dating lately? How's that been going? Like just kind of random convos in like the background of the vignettes. Adams K0 said, telepathy and summoning? Are the elders using some kind of sorcery now, or sufficiently advanced technology at least? I gotta double check Brooks's 2-year story. Did the tribe use the same pattern circle? Like, is it a well-known superstition that just doesn't normally work? P.S. Different pattern. The Satan summoning was a hexagram. Saturn used a pentagram. That's a really good callback to Brooks's thing. I don't remember that much of like what Brooks was doing before the concert stuff. I don't remember if that tribe, had any like connections that are kind of similar.
People checked the Saturn one specifically, and as far as we could tell, it was not the same. The one that was used for Brooks' cover story is kind of generic looking, to be entirely honest. Kind of like similar to like the pentagrams you'd see in like old Yu-Gi-Oh chapters more than anything else.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know about it being different here in the summoning pages. I'm actually having a hard time telling what's actually being used here. Like the Saturn one we get a really good look at. I do think I'm just going to trust Sanji here, who's basically like the whole purpose he's still standing here is to basically be the guy who goes, hey, wait, I saw that last time. But, hopefully we get a better look at them next chapter.
This next comment I just read gives me such a big idea. So this is from Kenshin Goku, who said, the 5 elders can communicate with each other at any part of the world. That is crazy. I wonder if that has something to do with science or a devil fruit. Luffy versus the 5 elders. I think Luffy can take them on, but Luffy has a history of getting captured. In the last 2 arcs, he got captured, LOL. Hopefully we don't see that happen here. Sucks we gotta wait 2 weeks to see how the elders look in devil fruit form. I'm going to say it again. Egghead is by far the best arc in One Piece. We pretty much got everything we wanted to see in past 20 plus years in this one arc. Agreed on a lot of that for sure, but this has me thinking, like it just kind of sparked something for me. The summoning stuff. This is how I could see this play out. I would love the story to go this way. Here we go. Luffy fights the Gorosei, and the Gorosei are way too strong. Like they just overpower Luffy. It's like a battle of attrition, but the message does get out after like the 10 minutes, and Luffy is defeated. The giants aren't able to save him, whatever, but the Gorosei managed to defeat him in the middle of the battle. And then the 5 elders are about to kill Luffy until Imu communicates with them telepathically and tells them not to, and instead to take Luffy with them to Mary Joa. And Imu summons all of them back. And so Luffy gets captured and is in Mary Joa, and then the rest of the Straw Hats regroup in Elbaf and have to mobilize with the Grand Fleet to basically take on Mary Joa to save Luffy.
That's kind of like a fully evolved version of the theory we were kicking around.
Right? Because
reverse
then,
impel down, but like in the extreme version of that.
That's how you get, like, Luffy is the ace in this scenario. And Imu, after the truth gets out, Imu has a reason to confront Nika. And so that's how this stuff happens. But of course, Luffy doesn't care. But like the idea of like Luffy kind of being thrust into Mary Joa, I just can't stop thinking about it. And okay, so we know that like there's a way to like get places quickly, right? Like there's the tunnel that you can get to Alabasta, and you can cross the Sky Islands and everything. What if there was a way to get from Elbaf to Mary Joa like that? Because it's so high. And that's how they get to Luffy. And it's not like this huge ordeal. And the giants could even tell them like they know of a way to get to Mary Joa because of that.
It's like a literal sky bridge.
Yeah. That could be perfect.
That would be interesting. That would be, I mean, I've liked this idea. I've liked this idea a bit, like doing the reverse of what we did before the time skip, but this time we follow the Straw Hats instead of Luffy specifically. Like, I like this idea. It feels fast, specifically like taking him to Mary Joa, but it is tantalizing all the same.
Yeah. I'll put a pin on that idea, but man, imagine if that happened. But of course, the simple thing would just be like, oh yeah, Luffy just, gets out of this jam and ends up somewhere else. But yeah, there's something about Imu getting thrown into the story at this point too would be pretty awesome. All right, but that's all I got. And I think we covered a lot of stuff too that got brought up in the Discord already. I think I did mention the Discord. I think Yamato's mom could still be Big Mom, but that's just a silly theory that I'll never give up, no matter how wrong it is. Yeah. Oh, I made a chart of like admirals or like admirals to be and like where they end up. So Kuzan with Blackbeard, Kizaru with the Cross Guild, Fujitora with Shanks, and then Sakazuki and Green Bull to be just, and then Kobe being an ally to the Straw Hats. I forgot that I had that. I threw that out there too, but that's just me thinking out loud.
I mean, we'll see. I don't know that the cops need reforming in that regard, but we'll see. We'll see.
Kobe hanging up his badge. Yeah, I don't know. All right, well that'll do it for Ricky Pirate Radio. You know where to find us, and if you were listening and you were like, you guys forgot about this, or hey, actually, what if this? Don't forget to hit us up in the Discord or email us if you prefer. RickyPirateRadio@gmail.com, and the link to our Discord is in the show notes as usual. And Travis, what are we going to do for our break week? I think we get 2 of them. I think it might actually be 2 weeks. I can't remember.
Well, a gun was put to my head last week to say, let me back on the podcast to talk about One Piece.
There we go.
I'm going to pull the trigger. So I imagine we'll be talking with Ali soon.
Perfect. So we'll be getting a first time One Piece watcher check-in. That should be a lot of fun. We got to be careful. Can't reveal anything about the story, as hard as that might be. Thanks as always for listening. We'll see y'all in the next one.